Going through this process honestly really puts it into perspective how good or bad any particular class is when you study the previous year's class with the benefit of hindsight. So we're going to look at the 2025 draft class once again. We're going to redraft them, starting out with our first tier of guys that I think, in my opinion, you can order them how you really want to, but in my opinion, they're the top three. Omarion Hampton, Travion Henderson, and Ashton Jeanty. Omarion Hampton, to me, just from a situational aspect, I think he's in the best spot. Obviously, you've got Jim Harbaugh, who is a tremendous head coach, who wants to run the ball first. And if you look at what Omarion Hampton did before he went down, it was actually very good. When he came back from the injury, it definitely was not the same, but I think when you look at him pre-ankle, the light flipped on in basically his third or fourth game, and he had a really good stretch there for a couple games before the injury. And on top of that, the offensive line was weakened by basically the beginning of the season because they had no Rashawn Slater from the start. All of that stuff that you saw this year from an offensive line perspective, that won't be what they look like in future years. And on top of that, they just got the best offensive coordinator on the market, at least for a year, with Mike McDaniel. So I think Omarion Hampton is in really good position from a dynasty perspective. At number 2 with Travion Henderson, I would say second best scenario right here. New England's offensive line, I think, is still under a little bit of a rebuild as well. I think when you give them more draft capital and more free agency opportunities, they're going to continue to hone in on that offensive line, because when you look at a guy like Will Campbell, for example, on the left tackle spot, I really don't think he's meant to be there long term, and I think he could be better utilized in other places, such as potentially guard. So that's all to say, I think Travion Henderson is in really good position because the guy is really young. We've obviously seen tons of explosion from Travion Henderson, and I think moving forward, it's just going to get better because Ramondre Stevenson is getting close to the age where you'd rather cast aside a running back, and the contract is definitely one they can move out of here in the next couple of years. Ashton Jeanty at 3. I just think from a situational standpoint, you have no idea what to expect with the Raiders. First of all, they still don't have their next head coach, so we're still in limbo from that aspect of what the direction of the franchise will ultimately be heading in. Number 2, I think the offensive line needs plenty of work. I do think getting Fernando Mendoza is a net positive for someone like Ashton Jeanty to help take some pressure off of him. But I do ultimately just kind of wonder what level of dysfunction can this player overcome, because Ashton Jeanty, it's not like he's a Bijan level talent or anything like that. I do think to a certain point he'll be hampered in his dynasty career, but I also still think he's worthy of being the top 3 and in tier 1. Now dropping down to our next tier, we've got Colston Loveland at number 4 and Jackson Dart at number 5. So Colston Loveland, I've talked about this a couple times already this offseason. I'm pretty big on buying the Bears. I think their stock is an ascending rocket. I really do. I mean, Ben Johnson was the perfect hire. Caleb Williams, I'm now pretty convinced, is that quarterback of the future. So they've got the quarterback right, and they've got the offensive play caller / head coach right. Those are 2 massive ingredients in what overall could make a delicious cake, that being the Chicago Bears offense. And Colston Loveland was Ben Johnson's first overall pick as a head coach. So I do ultimately just think that Colston Loveland, the future is so bright there. We obviously saw tremendous growth with him over the last 2 to 3 months of the season. I think that continues moving forward. Jackson Dart at number 5. This, at this point, is one of those scenarios where I look at the New York Giants as a team and I say buy their stock as well. Because John Harbaugh, guys, let's be honest, I think a lot of Ravens fans were frustrated, much like Steelers fans like myself were ready for Mike Tomlin to move on. But it's not that either one of those guys is a bad coach. I think it just needed change. I think John Harbaugh going to the Giants is the perfect equation for them. They needed an alpha to set a culture in there. Not that he's some scheme guy, but bringing in Todd Monken, which is allegedly what he's going to do if Monken doesn't get a head coaching job, which he probably won't, I think is a net positive for Jackson Dart as well. They'll probably make him play a little bit cleaner, which is a very good thing if you look at the way Dart plays. Because while he's a great running quarterback, and I'm sure they're going to want to continue to utilize that because it's a strength, they're going to make him play smarter, which is ultimately what you want from a guy like Jackson Dart, who's got tremendous amounts of potential, but he definitely needs to be honed in. And I think he'll also be able to hone in on some of those pocket passing skills that I think he kind of lacked in his rookie year with Todd Monken moving forward. At number 6, I've got Harold Fannin Jr. and Ted McMillan at number 7. I think when you look at Harold Fannin, this guy is in one of the worst spots, possibly the worst. The Browns are the Browns again. Like, spoiler alert, it's all the Browns once again. This team without Kevin Stefanski is about to go through some dark times because they don't have an answer at quarterback and they've got no offensive play caller all of a sudden. But, that being said, they struck oil with Harold Fannin Jr. That guy is a stud. And I do ultimately just kind of believe, if you look at the tight end position, that's been the one position over the last few years, probably more than most, that you've seen some of the best tight ends in the league be on the worst teams. Trey McBride, Arizona Cardinals, Brock Bowers, Las Vegas Raiders, Harold Fannin, Cleveland Browns. I really do think that he'll overcome this like you can't at the wide receiver position, the running back position, and even the quarterback position a lot of times. Now, Ted McMillan at number 7, I think probably is a little low for certain people, and I'll just clarify by saying this. The 3 guys ahead of him, I just value them more because they're at more premium positions from a dynasty perspective. Not that I don't value wide receivers. I very much value wide receivers a ton. It's just that I don't think that Ted is one of those Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Puka Nacua level prospects. First of all, I think he's going to be limited from a ceiling standpoint with Bryce Young. I just don't think Bryce Young is the long-term answer at quarterback, and I probably think they will look at him as their long-term quarterback. Number 2, I just don't view Ted on that same level as those other guys from a fantasy perspective. He doesn't run every route in the route tree, and I'm not saying he's not good. I'm just saying I think his ceiling is a little bit capped, and therefore I would just rather have a premium tight end like Loveland or a premium tight end like Fannin or a premium quarterback like Dart over a guy like Ted McMillan. And at 8, I've still got Emeka Egbuka here. And I think this is going to be one of those topics that people will discuss deep into the offseason from a fantasy perspective and from a dynasty perspective. Because Emeka Egbuka, we all know what happened. He was a dominant player in fantasy the first half of the year. And then that second half, it wasn't like he got worse. He disappeared from the offense entirely. He disappeared from that offense. It was really bizarre to watch. But at the same time, I don't look at it as an indictment on what he is. What he will be ultimately, I think is still a really good player. I think he still is a really good player that when you look at the Bucs wide receiver core, Mike Evans probably doesn't come back. Chris Godwin, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come back. So you basically got him and Jalen McMillan and Tez Johnson if they both get cut or traded. So I just think ultimately you got to look at a big picture and still see that Emeka Egbuka is very much in contention to be one of their top receivers in the next year. Not the next few, the next year. And if you want to see my entire 320 Dynasty rankings that are completely up to date how I want right now, you can go look at those rankings with the Outfitter subscription on my site, fsroundup.com. In addition to that, you'll also be able to vote on the trading post, which is completely free to vote if you have an account with us. And the 5,000th vote will get a full team breakdown for Dynasty from me this offseason. So there's a lot of great features happening right now from a Dynasty perspective on my site, fsroundup.com, and I want you to go check it out. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I think we start to get into some more interesting conversations here as well. I've got Cam Skattebo actually over Quinshon Judkins. And this one feels a little bit weird because Quinshon Judkins is several years younger than Cam Skattebo, and they both suffered the same catastrophic injury in their rookie seasons. So what gives, right? This comes from, once again, me valuing the Giants way more than I value the Cleveland Browns from a dynasty perspective. I think Cam Skattebo is one of those guys. In this system, if you look at Todd Monken and the way he wants to play, I think he'll maximize Cam Skattebo, assuming he comes back fully healthy. Now, of course, once again, the age does concern me to a certain extent, which is why he's not in the tier above him. But at the same time, man, I look at Cam Skattebo as clearly their lead back moving forward. I do think you'll have some Tyrone Tracy mixed in there, but I think when you line them both up side by side, Cam Skattebo was just the better player. And I think that Todd Monken will see that clearly as well. Quinshon Judkins at 10. Listen, if he was on a different team, he would be higher ranked. Because Quinshon Judkins, what you saw from him was actually very good, all things considered. Being on the Browns, their offensive line was no good last year. He did a lot of good things. I just think that ultimately the Cleveland Browns are a tire fire once again, like they have been for the majority of my lifetime. So it's just really hard for me to see him and a guy like Ashton Jeanty overcome that when they're not in good position. And I just ultimately think that Cam Skattebo, what we saw from him on the field was a little bit better than Quinshon Judkins. So give me Cam Skattebo over Judkins. And then I've got Luther Burden at number 11 to round out this tier. And this may surprise some people. I really value Luther Burden as someone who I believe could really take a leap. And I'm talking like next year. Luther Burden, to me, when you look at advanced metrics on the guy, everything would indicate that this guy is not only a tremendous player for the Chicago Bears, and not only a great fit in their system, but potentially their number one wide receiver moving forward. First of all, once again, like Colston Loveland, he was also Ben Johnson's second overall pick as a head coach. So you know he wants him in the system. And I ultimately think that when you look at DJ Moore, that's a player who's probably on his way out of the Bears in this offseason. And Rome Odunze, I wouldn't say is destined to stay. I think he probably will, but I wouldn't say it's a lock. So Luther Burden, to me, a part of this Bears offense that I just want pieces in, I think is one of those top guys that you want a piece of. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we've got Tyler Warren at 12 and RJ Harvey at 13. So Tyler Warren, I think people will take this as a slight, right? Because what we saw from Warren, when particularly Daniel Jones was his quarterback, was awesome. He was one of the best tight ends in fantasy last year with Daniel Jones healthy. And I would agree. I am a big Tyler Warren fan. It's kind of crazy because at the beginning of the video, I said it helps me put in perspective how good the 2026 class is compared to 2025, because I don't think that 2026 has the depth of 2025's class. But the fact that Tyler Warren's at 12 should prove to you guys this class has tons of depth. I just look at this situation as a big question mark, right? Because Daniel Jones suffering a torn Achilles, what's the future of him in Indianapolis? And if it's not him, what do they do next? Because we saw the drop-off from Tyler Warren's perspective as soon as Phillip Rivers was the quarterback. And I enjoyed the heck out of watching Phillip Rivers when we got him for the last several weeks of the season. But at the same time, it was not good for Tyler Warren. So I think Tyler Warren, older player than Harold Fannin, older player than Colston Loveland. That's why he's my number 3 tight end ultimately in this class, because they've got a smaller window with him compared to those other two guys who were just far younger than him. RJ Harvey at 13. I think that when you look at the age, you have to view that as a red flag, right? This guy is basically the same situation as Cam Skattebo. He's actually a little bit older than Cam Skattebo. And when you look at him from an advanced metric perspective, he really wasn't that good in 2025. Now, when you look at the touchdowns, he was a very, very impressive player at or around the red zone. But as far as breaking off big plays and being a very efficient runner, he was neither of those things. So I just kind of wonder, what does the ceiling look like with him as he gets older? Because it's not like he's 22 going on 23. The guy is 25 going on 26, basically. So it's not like we've got this enormous window with RJ Harvey like those other running backs that are ranked above him. Matthew Golden's at 14 and Cam Ward is at 15. Matthew Golden, I think from the perspective of draft capital, and when you add on top of the fact that Green Bay's wide receiver room is about to undergo a lot of changes, that's the reason he's sticking around this level. Because if you look at the play this year, it was a massive disappointment. And I think that Matthew Golden is someone I always thought of as overrated from a dynasty perspective, but I'm not going to rank him down too much because of the fact that Green Bay's room is about to change. Romeo Doubs, contract year. Dontavian Wicks, contract year. Jaden Reed, he's about to be on a contract year. So there's no guarantee that they keep any of those three guys. I would imagine they'll keep at least one, probably someone either Jaden Reed or Romeo Doubs. I don't know who, but they won't be able to keep all of them, right? So I do think that Matthew Golden is just from a pure necessity standpoint going to continue to get more involved in this offense as we move forward. And that's really why I'm not underranking him too much. Cam Ward. I think when you look at Cam Ward, there's a lot of things that I don't like. And it's unfortunate because I think the talent is actually pretty good. I think the guy can make ridiculous level throws. The arm talent is there, and I think he has enough rushing upside to be very mobile and a threat if he's utilized that way in an offense. I really hate Tennessee's structure as a team, and Robert Saleh I don't think is the greatest hire. Like, I wanted him in Pittsburgh because I think he fit well, but I at the same time don't think he fit well in Tennessee. And we don't know what the offensive coordinator situation is, which is going to determine what Cam Ward's future trajectory will look like, because Saleh's not defense. So Cam Ward's at a disadvantage, man. And it's not really looking much better than what it did in year one, because he had an offensive coach at the very least in year one. Maybe not a good one, but at least the effort was going towards that offense. They've got to look for a good offensive coordinator to really help revive some of his value here. And at number 16, I've got Travis Hunter to round out this tier, and he, to me, is the most intriguing conversation moving forward. Because if I line him up with a guy like Jordan Tyson, the answer is very clear. Jordan Tyson this year is a much better dynasty investment than Travis Hunter is. I would actually say Carnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon are far better investments than Hunter is as well. And everybody knows this is not a talent discussion. This is a discussion about how the Jags are going to utilize him moving forward. Because this year was a disaster. A flat-out disaster. They tried to use him both ways. He ended up getting injured doing it. You'd think they'd learn, hey, we got to really utilize this guy on one side of the ball. It doesn't seem like they've learned anything, because he said, I'm still planning on being a two-way player. It makes no sense. I want to believe that the Jags will ultimately be like, hey, listen, man, we can't have you doing both. We think you're a better receiver, so let's just make you a full-time receiver, and let's get you good at one position before we start trying to do multiple things with you. That, to me, is the right answer. I don't know how they're going to utilize him moving forward, but my spidey senses, I guess, are just up on this one, because I just have no idea how they're going to utilize him moving forward. So I can't have him any higher than this right here, and some people may even think this is still too high. Dropping down to our next tier, I think it gets interesting here. Trey Harris, Pat Bryant, Jaden Higgins, all second-day draft pick receivers that I think are actually really intriguing from a dynasty perspective. Trey Harris, to start out with, I prefer him over the other two, because Trey Harris, when you look at the Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver room, I actually think there's a case to be made that he could be their wide receiver one next year, and that's including Ladd McConkey. Not that he's going to be better from a fantasy perspective, but I think that what I mean by this is I think he could be kind of their more do-it-all dominant receiver, because I really don't think they have much attachment to Quentin Johnston at this point in his career. You've obviously got nothing really outside of Ladd McConkey that really matters. And I think Ladd is going to be better in a more slot and specific type of routes role, not their do-it-all receiver. I think Trey Harris really does have a chance to take a big leap in year two. And Pat Bryant, I would also agree with that same sentiment. It's not that he's better than Troy Franklin. I kind of think Troy Franklin is a better player than people give him credit for. The way that you're seeing them use him when he's been available the last 2 months of the year has been favored more towards Bryant than it has towards Franklin. And Courtland Sutton's the number one, right? They locked him up this past offseason. He's getting older, and I do think there's a window here where Pat Bryant could take advantage from a fantasy perspective, but ultimately you don't consider him the number one when you've got a guy like Courtland Sutton there, which is why I can't rank him too high. But at the same time, I see potential here for Pat Bryant going into year two to take a pretty big leap. And then Jaden Higgins at 19. The reason he's down below these other two guys, and while it may be unfair, we saw more of Jaden Higgins than we did of Trey Harris and Pat Bryant this year, and it wasn't that great. And I think it could get better. Right, I do think some of it falls on C.J. Stroud for being an off-target passer, but at the same time, I think Jaden Higgins is the type of guy that is not going to be a number one. I think he could be a really good number two in the league. Not that he's going to be some great route runner in the future. I don't think that's his game. But I do think he could be a really positive number two contributor if they could figure out the passing game in Houston, which there's a lot to figure out there, obviously. And Oronde Gadsden's at 20 to round out the tier. I think of Gadsden as a very intriguing player moving forward as well, because that Chargers receiving core, as I just discussed, very much up in the air. I think they need to make moves. But I also think that Oronde Gadsden showed enough in his rookie year to continue to have a leash with the Los Angeles Chargers. I think he definitely was their best pass-catching tight end the majority of the season. I think when you look at what happened to the Chargers, you kind of have to, again, put things in perspective a little bit, because without an offensive line, you can't function as an offense. And that really deteriorated throughout the season. So ultimately, I kind of look at next year as a fresh start if they decided to keep rolling with Oronde Gadsden, which I kind of think they're going to do. So he really does have room to move up these rankings in this draft if we were to redraft it again. Dropping down to our last tier, we've got Woody Marks at 21 and Kyle Williams at 22. Woody Marks, there's no secret about this one, was one of the better running back rookie performers of 2025. I'm not here to dispute that with you. What I'm here to dispute is that typically late round running backs, they don't get favored in an offense, right? You've seen this time and time again. Think of James Robinson with the Jacksonville Jaguars back during COVID years. That guy was really good. But you know what? He was an undrafted player, meaning they had no attachment to the guy. So the very next year, off that good rookie season he had, they drafted Travis Etienne. Then he gets injured. He does well again, and they still move off him. Those guys have no safety net. And that's kind of what Woody falls into here. I get it. He was a draft pick for the Texans, and I think he'll have a role, which is why he's still in here, compared to someone like Ja'Cory Krosky, Bill Krosky, who was a 7th-round pick, who I think the Washington Commanders, realistically, with a new coaching staff and an offensive coordinator come in, have no attachment to him. And Kyle Williams at 22. From a draft capital perspective, and I think from the perspective of having Drake May as the quarterback, you want to invest in a guy like Kyle Williams, right? Because Kyle Williams is a guy that I think has talent. And I think they came out, particularly when he was on deep routes. But that's the problem, is they kind of tried to push him to be more involved in the offense, and it never really worked for Kyle Williams this year. He still remains more of a deep threat than anything else. So I kind of think, what if we're at this point where he just kind of is what he is? Not that he can't grow heading into the second year, but I didn't see enough from him in his rookie year to put him much higher than this in my redraft. And then Kyle Monangai at 23 and Caleb Johnson is at 24. How the mighty fall, man. Kyle Monangai, I think, is a better dynasty asset moving forward. And of course, really, this all has to do with what the Bears ultimately decided to do with Kyle Monangai moving forward. Because once again, late round running back doesn't typically bode well for his safety in the offense. And I do believe they'll target a new running back moving forward, because not that Swift was bad. I just think that when you look at Ben Johnson, he moved off him once to get Jahmyr Gibbs. So I do think there's better out there in his mind that he could go with in the future and just cut bait with Swift. I actually kind of think of Monangai as a guy he'd want to stick with, but I could be wrong. So we'll see how this one plays out. And right now, I've got him at 23 over Caleb Johnson, whose future is so uncertain because he was irrelevant this year. And the Steelers coaching staff, with Tomlin, they didn't typically love rookies, which I kind of give him a pass for. Now, at the same time, the one play that he really cemented his rookie legacy with was that kick return that he let go out into the end zone and get recovered by the other team. Like, it was a pure lack of football understanding that really ticked off the Steelers coaching staff to the point where they would just make him not dress for games. So I really do think Caleb Johnson gets a little bit of a clean slate, but at the same time, man, I kind of do wonder what the future holds with Caleb Johnson in a very negative way. So let me know how you would redraft the 2025 draft, and let me know what you think it compares like with the 2026 draft. And if you want to see this year's top 12 rookie wide receivers, click on this video right here.